Although Christian McCaffrey is back on the field, he hasn't put up great production yet. That will change this weekend. We dig into and debate our running back and quarterback rankings for Week 12 on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, helping you win your fantasy football leagues. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. No, I'm not doing this. I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, it is time to start our positional rankings for Week 12. We always start with our running backs and quarterbacks on Wednesday's show, and then tomorrow on Thursday, we will get into our wide receivers and tight ends. Right at the top, let's start with Christian McCaffrey because he's been fine, right? He's been back for 2 weeks, finished as the running back 11 his first week back, then running back 16, second week back. It's okay production. It's not Christian McCaffrey production, but you have him as your running back 1 this week against the Packers. I have him at running back 5. Tell the listeners why you think CMC will break out this week.
Yeah, I mean, he has a very high floor. We know that. He's going to get the touches. He's going to be very productive. He's been productive against any team, anywhere. And you look at this game, the 49ers are struggling. There's even some rumors about Kyle Shanahan being on the hot seat, which I do not believe, and I think it's ludicrous. But there is some pressure to win games. Brock Purdy's hurting a little bit, so hopefully he'll be able to go in this game. But the Packers' pass defense is pretty good. They also force a lot of turnovers. But you can still run on the Packers, and that's how you kind of have to beat them. And you saw last week, the Bears had some success with DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson. It has to be the McCaffrey show to kind of get the other parts of the offense going. We'll see about George Kittle. If he doesn't play, that's a concern. You also have Deebo Samuel letting down here. Can't be all about Juwan Jennings in this offense. It has to be other guys stepping up. And McCaffrey can take over a game like this. The 49ers have really great history when healthy against the Packers to take them down. So, again, this is a very important game, and I think that's how they have to win, is use a lot of McCaffrey, not only just rushing the ball, but catching it and getting some good matchups there against the Packers linebackers and safeties.
Yeah, the Packers are middle of the pack, no pun intended, versus the run this year. They're not a defense you have to be scared of, not one that you're necessarily targeting, but Christian McCaffrey, he was on the field for 94% of the plays last week. He's getting the workload. It's going to end up coming back to him. Now, we have all the popular names at the top who've been killing it. Joe Mixon, Saquon Barkley, Devin Achane, Jahmyr Gibbs, Derrick Henry. Like, those guys are no-brainer questions here. Kenneth Walker, you have ranked all the way at running back 3. We're a little bit different on him. I have him at running back 11. Of course, you're going to play him, but that would be his highest finish since week 4 for running back 3 here for Kenneth Walker. It is a nice matchup against the Cardinals, but he's been struggling as of late.
Yeah, he's not the most efficient runner. Last week, he got it done with a touchdown, and he's getting just involved in the passing game to make it okay when you add that to his rushing total and the scores. But this seems like a game where they're going to have to really trust him because the Cardinals have been forcing a lot of turnovers. Geno Smith made it a little too close for comfort. I know he had the game-winning touchdown last week, but it was getting rough, and this offense wasn't doing a lot. So back at home, the Cardinals, I don't know if they're going to play as good of defense as they've played at home the past couple of weeks against the Bears and Jets, right? The Seahawks are a little bit more competent offensively. I also see two teams that are going to play fast and a lot of plays on the field. So I also see an even game script. I mean, this game's a pick 'em. So if James Conner is going to have a big game, I think you can have a big game on the other side with Kenneth Walker, just because these two teams do like to run the ball and they do give up a lot on the ground. So I think that's how you're going to get a lot of things happen. And then you'll, of course, see the receivers and the quarterbacks get involved here. But I think the difference between Geno Smith and Kyler Murray's, I think you'll have a little bit more threat to score touchdowns from Walker than Connor will be. So that's kind of why I'm down on Geno in relation to Walker. But I think Walker and Connor both have really good games in an even matchup for both teams in Seattle.
Yeah, we both have Connor ranked high this week. I have him at 7. You have him at 9. Since week 4, the Seahawks are allowing the 5th most fantasy points per game to running backs. Connor's just like, he's a really good player, and you never know the type of production he's going to have on the ground. But if he doesn't do it on the ground, then he does it through the air. If he doesn't do it through the air, he gets touchdowns. Like, there's so many different ways for him to score. Before their bye, he was a running back 4 on the week. So really love Connor in this matchup. Now, another guy we both have ranked high again this week after having him ranked high last week, and it worked out. It's David Montgomery. We both have him as top 10 plays again this week. And this is kind of bold, right? Because last week we had him as a top 10 play with Jahmyr Gibbs, and he finished as running back 4. So did Gibbs. He finished as running back 5, I believe. But the weeks prior to that, it was running back 28, 27, 24, 16. So we're saying David Montgomery is going to have a second great week. I mean, it's a good matchup against the Colts. You expect the Lions to run a ton. I think both Gibbs and Montgomery have another great fantasy week.
Yeah, really, the Jets against the Colts last week, it wasn't anything to do with the running game. They killed it with Breece Hall, and they looked good doing so. And when they went away from that is when they had some trouble. And we know, again, the Lions are a great passing team when they're a great running team. I mean, Jared Goff is the best play action quarterback in the league this season. So they need the whole engine to start with what the running backs do. The Colts are very giving to running games this season, so that should open it up here for Montgomery. Gibbs, they're always a good threat to score, both of them in different ways. But when you score, you immediately have a high floor because you start with those 6 points, and then Montgomery's capable of having multiple scores and a good yardage here. You'd think at some point the Lions will play from ahead, and Montgomery will be in there as well. So all things line up pretty well. Again, I have not been impressed with the Colts' run defense all season long, so that's great news for Montgomery and Gibbs.
Yeah, it really is. Now, we're both getting a little bit chilly on Kyren Williams. I still have him at running back 8. I'm going to end up moving him down a little bit. You have him at running back 11. It's a really tough matchup against the Eagles. Now, I will say the Eagles, it has been a tough matchup for running backs, but last week they did allow both Brian Robinson Jr. and Austin Eckler to finish as top 14 fantasy running backs on the week. So maybe it's getting a little bit better, but they've only allowed 3 rushing touchdowns to running backs all season long. So can we trust Kyren Williams? Because we know so much of his production comes on that touchdown or not, which he was killing it for the first half of the year. And now he hasn't scored a rushing touchdown in the last 4 games.
Yeah, Dave Montgomery has kept up that touchdown mojo. Kyren Williams is not. And the problem again with Kyren Williams is he doesn't get involved too much in the passing game. That's my concern. That was really my concern early, too, in drafting him. That, again, he's had the injury issues. That was one thing. But he's not going to give you anything in the passing game if the Rams just get behind or they decide to go nuts throwing the ball. And this is a game where they could easily get behind, right? And they have to throw quite a bit to Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in this one. And what do you do there? Do you throw to Kyren Williams? You probably get a few more catches in that scenario, but enough to offset this tough matchup, that's hard to say. But I think based on volume, you still have to like him as a borderline RB1-2, but just have to temper your expectations. I mean, these matchups are tough. And again, the Patriots didn't seem all that tough on paper, but again, if you look at his production, I think there's a direct correlation between Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua being in the lineup together and the Rams going back to the passing game and also winning doing that as well, right? So I think there's some balance there that's kind of out of balance here with them wanting to throw a little bit more without Kyren.
Yeah, like you're still playing Kyren unless you just have the most stacked running back options out there. And same thing with Jonathan Taylor, right? Like we have him lower. You have running back 13, I'm at 14. Really tough defense against the Lions. It's going to come down to that touchdown, but he gets too much volume. He's too talented of a player that he could break out in any given game. Just lower expectations. And again, unless you have an insane, you have the Mixon and the Barkley and, you're choosing between insane names, then you're playing these guys. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into our running back rankings here in a moment. I love Brian Robinson Jr. this week. I have him as my running back 12. Spoiler alert. We'll get into him and the rest of our running back rankings right after we take a quick break.
This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by PrizePicks. What is PrizePicks? Well, it is the easy daily fantasy sports game, the best place to get real money sports action with more than 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You must pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long only on PrizePicks. You can win up to 10 times your money there, but you can also do 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks on PrizePicks. That's pretty special there. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. And PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can rely upon the money being there as quick as 15 minutes. And PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. So very easy to get your money and put down your money there for DFS on PrizePicks. Sign today and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed there with that $5. PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. That's specials like Taco Tuesday that come all the time on PrizePicks that also make it easier for you to play. PrizePicks is the best way to real money again this football season. Which players are going off, which players aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions to real money all season long, only on PrizePicks. Check it out. PrizePicks is great for you to join right now. Get in on the action there. PrizePicks, run your game.
This episode is also brought to you by Z-Biotics. Do you struggle with hangovers? You know, maybe after you have a couple of glasses of wine, too many espresso martinis. This Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is what will help you with those hangovers. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. This is how it works when you get a hangover. So you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct into the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this product down. So all you have to do is remember to take your Z-Biotic before your first drink of the night. Obviously, then drink responsibly. Don't go crazy. Pace yourself. Drink some water throughout the night. And then you're going to wake up feeling refreshed the next morning and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LockedOnNFL at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. All right, let's keep going with our running back rankings, Vinny. I'm starting right at the top here at my running back 12, Brian Robinson Jr. against the Cowboys. The Cowboys defense has just given up. I mean, they really have. We just saw Joe Mixon go 3 rushing touchdowns against them, could do whatever he wanted. And Brian Robinson Jr. is talented. He's going to run all over them. And so will Austin Eckler, right? Like they both can get it done like they did last week. So I like both of these guys, but Robinson I have at 12. With Eckler a little bit lower at 25, but I also still think he's a solid RB2 this week.
Yeah, I think you just start your Commanders if you have them this week because I'm looking at Dan Quinn on the other sideline. I don't know if he's like laughing inside or the vibes that he has with the Commanders. It seems like they've taken the soul away from the Cowboys. I mean, he's taken their defense. He's took some of their players as well as his defensive coordinator all came from Dallas. He knows this Mike McCarthy offense in and out. He knows that it's pretty weak with Cooper Rush in there and not a lot of weapons. So this is great for the offense and the defense because, again, this is not a bad DFS combination. Brian Robinson Jr. and the Commanders D this week because the Commanders D is going to pour it on. And you'll probably see a lot of running from Robinson, Eckler, Jayden Daniels in the second half. So let's hope Jayden Daniels lights them up early, gets that lead with Terry McLaurin and some of the other weapons, turns it over to Brian Robinson. You figure he has a chance to score multiple touchdowns in this game as well, even if the yardage is like 60 to 80, right? There's a very good chance the Commanders score a lot, and if that's the case, Brian Robinson is going into the end zone at least once. So I love it, and Commanders, all things Commanders, very good this week. I think they'll be relentless, and they're not going to take it easy on the Cowboys this week with Quinn as their coach.
Yeah, the Commanders should put up a huge game. I'm excited for Jayden Daniels as well. We'll get to him in our quarterback section. Now, to your running back 12 on the week, you have Tyrone Tracy Jr. The last time we saw him, he fumbled the game away. International game, fumbled away. He was all upset on the bench. Do we think he still holds that lead job? Do they go back to Singletary because of that fumble? Do they keep giving this young guy a chance because they have no hope anyways? The Buccaneers are actually a very favorable matchup for running backs this season, giving up the 6th most points per game to running backs. It's not so much about what they allow on the ground. They're allowing so many receptions and receiving yards to running backs, which Tracy hasn't necessarily been getting, but he is a converted wide receiver, so he can do it. I like Tracy this week as well, but just a little bit nervous about how they're going to use him after that fumble. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's fair to think about. But they've had a bye to maybe correct it and work on it. They're also, their main pivot was going away from Daniel Jones. And again, Tommy DeVito, I think he's going to be more calculated the way he runs his offense. I do like all the shorter targets a little bit more. That includes Tracy out of the backfield. And you look at him, you look at Theo Johnson as a great matchup this week. So Malik Neighbors is going to have to do a lot of damage with volume, I think. You're not going to get necessarily some field stretching plays, so he needs to get volume and score. Tyrone Tracy, I think, will get volume. So, again, these Giants want to get these rookies involved. Johnson, Tracy, Neighbors. That's the future of their offense, no matter what they have at quarterback, right? They can't worry too much about what they're looking at in the past with Devin Singletary. They need to turn the page. So I think all these youngsters with Tommy DeVito will really benefit from him at quarterback.
Yeah, we'll see with this Tommy DeVito thing. But yeah, Tyrone Tracy's still my running back 15. So I like him this week. I'm interested to see how they use him with Tommy DeVito. If Tommy DeVito does check down more to him, this will be a kind of a new Giants offense that we're seeing this week. Now, there's this one running back that we're very different on, and it's my boy Najee Harris. Again, I just want to put it out there. I'm a Steelers fan, so maybe I have my bias, rose-colored glasses on, but Najee Harris, I have at running back 13 against the Browns on Thursday Night Football. This player is probably the one we're most different on. You have him as running back 28, so 15 spots different. I'll just say he's been at least running back 18 or better in each of the last 5 games he's played. So there's that, right? And then also the Browns just gave up, I know Taysom Hill's not a running back, but they gave up 138 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns to him. Then before that was their week 10 bye. In week 9, they gave J.K. Dobbins 2 rushing touchdowns against the Browns, 23 fantasy points. The week before that, Derrick Henry had 73 rushing yards and a touchdown on just 11 carries against the Browns. So they are giving up a lot of yards and a lot of rushing touchdowns. That's why I like Najee Harris this week.
Yeah, they're giving up rushing touchdowns, but a team that doesn't score a lot of touchdowns in the red zone are the Steelers. And the one thing that really helps Najee Harris, I'll say this, and maybe I'm a little bit down on him this week. I'm just never excited to play him. And I kind of look at, is he going to get a touchdown? And if he doesn't, then I kind of drop him a little bit more. The Browns are pretty good against the run. They're still decent against traditional running backs. So I'll say that. And the weather's going to be bad. I mean, it's going to be 39.
That's great.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So, so I think that might work out in his favor. But again, how do they play it? Are the Browns going to put up much of a fight here? It's very hard for me to read Najee Harris from week to week. So given where we have him ranked, he's going to probably finish somewhere in between. Like, I think he's still playable. I mean, he's just outside my top 24 running back. So he's playable. I wouldn't extend myself to Jaylen Warren. However, I don't want to have too much in this game because the Browns, again, are still decent against traditional running backs. Last week, they might want to clean up some things. They're at home, right? So that also could change the thing. I don't think it's a particularly good matchup also for this offensive line against the Browns front in terms of running the ball. So there's that. So we'll see how it all plays out, but I think he'll probably finish somewhere between. I don't say he's completely unplayable. I'm just not excited to play him. If you have to play him, you probably do because, again, 6 teams are on bye. So you got to extend and just take what you can get. And at least he's a guy that's seeing key touches.
Yeah, you must really hate Najee. To have him at running back 28 with 6 teams on bye is Wild. No, I really think he's a great play this week. So we're different there. We'll see how that turns out. I'm probably somewhere in the middle where he's been finishing. Now we have J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, technically, well, both of them, get a revenge game this week against the Ravens. Now the Ravens have been good against running backs, but I still have J.K. Dobbins as running back 18 this week. Give him at running back 20. I'm not getting into the Gus Edwards revenge game. Like, it would only be J.K. Dobbins that I'm thinking about playing. But do you think he goes off against his old team this week?
I don't know if he'll go off. I think he could have a solid game. I think he could finally get back in the end zone here against them. But when I look at it, I mean, Gus Edwards also has not been the automatic goal line back. They've used Hassan Haskins in that role the past couple of weeks. He did score 2 weeks prior, didn't score last week. But when you look at Edwards, like, they're not going to get him on the field for revenge. I think he'll be just as happy if they win the game and Dobbins has a big game, right? So, again, these are also very tough run defenses, both of them, the Chargers and the Ravens. So I don't see a lot maybe working on the ground. I mean, Derrick Henry is obviously a play, and there's a good chance. But I think Dobbins and Henry are probably going to be a little bit touchdown dependent this week based on the matchups, and I think they're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. But you have to keep playing Dobbins. I mean, he's right up there in production. I mean, Henry's always there. But with Dobbins, he's been in the top 10 among running backs and what you need out of them and rushing yards and all that. So, again, he's an every week play for me at this stage.
And then we have to talk about the Chiefs backfield because it looks like Isaiah Pacheco is going to come back from his injury that he's been gone since, week 2 he got injured and he's been gone since then. Are you playing him in his first week back? I mean, he couldn't get a better matchup, right? Against the Panthers. They're giving up by far the most fantasy points to the running backs this year. I think you play Pacheco right away. But the issue is now, what do you do with Kareem Hunt, right? Is it Kareem Hunt? Does he keep getting production? Does he keep getting the work? Or do they just give it all to Pacheco? Or do you play them both in this great matchup?
Yeah, I think the bye says you overextend on some backfields and maybe fade a few others, but this is one where you would overextend because, again, this team should be up on the Panthers quite a bit. I think the Chiefs are going to have their way, and it's going to be the principal playmakers, by the way. I don't know if they'll need the wide receivers as much, but I think they could easily find a touchdown for Hopkins, Worthy, and Travis Kelce this week, and then also run the ball effectively in the second half. So I think it's going to be a classic Chiefs blowout. They were tired of what happened last week in Buffalo. They need a good matchup to get back on track. Carolina really can't stop anything that the Chiefs do particularly well. They'll get blown off the ball here by the Chiefs. So I think there's a chance for Pacheco and Hunt to have very nice games this week. And again, you got to play. If they have a good matchup, you got to play those running backs. Much like I do think the Bucs with Rashad White and Bucky Irving, the matchup is good enough to play both of them again this week.
So very, very quickly to end the running back discussion here, rank these 3 guys: Isaiah Pacheco against the Panthers, Javonte Williams against the Raiders, or Bucky Irving against the Giants. All 3 good matchups. All 3, we don't know what their usage will be.
Yeah, I think I'm going to roll the dice with Javonte Williams. Now, it seems crazy because you don't know if it's going to be him or Audric Estime, but it's the Raiders. This is the worst team. They could put in both of them and they could just go off. But I think Javonte Williams, maybe they did some kind of wake-up call business with him a couple weeks ago, but he looked really good last week. I can't deny that. So the Raiders stink. So, I mean, the Raiders, talk about another team that's just going through the motions and giving up. That's another one as well. And the running game should, again, dominate for that team because, again, it's the Broncos. They want to keep taking pressure off Bo Nix on the road.
I think I'm going to go with Bucky Irving. He's getting the volume. He's a really, really good running back, a great matchup. The Giants are giving up the most yards per carry to running back. So I'm going to go the Bucky Irving side. I think it's a little bit safer than both Javonte Williams and Isaiah Pacheco, but I think they're all 3 solid plays this week. We're going to now transition into our quarterback rankings. Jayden Daniels, it hasn't been great for him over the last month and a half. So we think that's going to change this week. We'll get into Jayden Daniels and the rest of our quarterback rankings right after we take a quick break. History, economics, the great works of literature, the meaning of the U.S. Constitution. Did you study these things in school? Probably not. Or even if you did, maybe it's time for a refresher. Time and technology have changed a lot of things, but they have not changed basic fundamental truths about the world and our place in it. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses. These are some of the courses that are available. Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and a brand new documentary style course on Marxism, socialism, and communism. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockdown to enroll. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockdown to register. Hillsdale.edu/lockdown. We both have the exact same two guys on the top. It's not a shocker. Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson. I know Lamar Jackson struggled against the Steelers. He always does. He'll be fine, even against the tough Chargers defense. Then I have Kyler Murray third because he's been fantastic. You have him 5. Like, you're obviously playing him. But then the guy I want to discuss is Jayden Daniels. You have him 3. I have him 4. That's not where he's come close to finishing lately. It's been quarterback 24, 25, 10, 11, 30, 11, 12. Like, he hasn't finished as a top guy since week 3. So why will that change this week? Because he gets the Cowboys.
Yeah, I think the schedule gets a little bit easier as well. This was a bit of a tough stretch here. I mean, any rookie quarterback would struggle with that combination of defenses. And the Cowboys, maybe we looked at the schedule and said, oh, this could be hard, right? And now we're saying, no, it's not going to be. So the key for Jayden Daniels is getting that deep ball going. I mean, Terry McLaurin disappeared last week. The Eagles did a great job on him and made sure that they didn't go to him, and that kind of changed the whole game plan. So when McLaurin is unlocked, it's much like Jared Goff. If the running game's unlocked, he's going to be good. If McLaurin is unlocked, you know that Jayden Daniels is going to be a better fantasy quarterback. And part of it is the bad luck sometimes, right? I mean, when it gets down to the goal line, right, you have the Eagles, and they're like, Jalen Hurts, take it in. And what the Commanders did early was Jayden Daniels was doing that in week 1. But then they've like, okay, Brian Robinson or Eckler, or someone else is going to touch the ball, or Jeremy McNichols at the goal line. So sometimes it's just getting those touchdowns. If you get that second touchdown, it's a big deal. But the big thing, again, if he can make up for a little bit with the passing game, getting it downfield to McLaurin, run a little bit more to get to like 50 yards, then you're in business. So some of these cheat code quarterbacks haven't been as cheat codey as we expect. So when we want him to have a big game, throw the ball downfield, run a little bit more, I think both of those things can happen against the Cowboys.
It definitely should. Like, if Jayden Daniels can't put up a huge week this week, then maybe we're overestimating him in terms of fantasy, his fantasy value. But this week, if you roster him, he's a must start. Now, obviously, Justin Herbert has been balling. You're going to keep rolling with him. It gets a nice matchup against the Ravens. He's been fantastic for fantasy. Put him into your lineup. But once we get to our quarterback 6, I have Baker Mayfield, you have Bo Nix, and we're kind of switched on those two guys. I have Bo Nix as my quarterback 9, you have Baker as your quarterback 11. As long as Baker gets back Mike Evans, I think he's going to go right back to being an elite fantasy quarterback like he was with him. And this matchup is great against the Giants. They only have Baker's biggest issue is interceptions, right? The Giants have 1 interception this entire season. So I got to go with Baker this week. Why do you love Bo Nix so much? I like him. He's my quarterback 9, but quarterback 6 is a little hefty.
Yeah, I do like what he did last week, and he's getting the Raiders, and I feel like he's going to run a little bit more. Actually, he didn't need to run at all, sadly, against the Falcons, which I thought he was going to do. But when you're throwing wide open guys downfield, why the heck would you take off and run? So I didn't expect the Falcons to be so bad defensively, but the Raiders can be, and I think you also look at it, there's an opportunity to run and flex a little bit that way. So I think you can pad his stats that way. I mean, some of the people behind Bo Nix ahead of Mayfield, I think they'll all have good matchups. Jared Goff playing it off the running game against Indianapolis. Brock Purdy, we'll see if he plays. He's going to have to keep it up there against the Packers. Mahomes has a great matchup. Tua has a great matchup. So there's a bunch of guys, thankfully, that we can play this week with our buys and feel good about that we don't always feel good about. So Baker Mayfield, again, I can see him finishing as high as QB5 this week easily if he gets the touchdowns there. But again, I'm just going down a little bit, maybe also because they're playing the Giants. I don't know how much if they're going to relentlessly throw the ball, especially if White and Irving are involved. And after the bye, I think they're going to run the ball a little bit better in the second half as well.
That is a good point. I feel like Baker has been putting up a lot of points because his defense has been so bad and he's had to throw a ton. I don't know how bad their defense can be against the Giants. So how much will he have to throw in the fourth quarter? Are they going to be down? But he's been such a good fantasy quarterback that I think they could get a big lead with him. Again, as long as Mike Evans is there, I'm going to put him down if Evans can't go. But he was seen at practice today. Mike Evans was. So doing some work. So that's a good sign. I wanted to ask you, because you brought up guys with these good matchups. Would you rather go with Tua Tagovailoa against the Patriots or Patrick Mahomes against the Panthers? Do you know that Tua has more top 10 finishes this year than Patrick Mahomes? Isn't that hilarious?
Yeah, I don't know if that surprised me too much because of his weaponry.
Tua hasn't played.
I know, but his weapons are so good. Like when he does play, he can back into some scoring, right? This one is tough for me. Again, it comes down to the touchdowns. I mean, Patrick Mahomes had a really tough matchup. He didn't even get to 200 yards passing, but he had 2 touchdowns. Noah Gray and a third one that was also there he had 3 TDs. So these quarterbacks in the middle.
He had 3 touchdowns and he still finishes the quarterback 17 on the week.
Yeah, so that's the thing is these guys might be both a little bit touchdown dependent, but that's the thing is that maybe that's kind of the weird thing in fantasy, right? Is like quarterbacks can have a very good game and somehow not get the touchdowns, where you can have touchdowns and not deliver either. So I don't know. I think they're both playable because of the bye week. I wouldn't get too excited about them. The problem also is the other teams they're playing are bad. So I'm looking, hopefully, these guys can get 2-15-2 and get out of there. And that would be a good start for me. But we're not putting them too high either. I have Mahomes at 9, 2 at 10. It'd probably be lower if all these people weren't on bye this week. So, and you have these guys at 11 and 12. So we're not expecting massive games, but playable above average games for sure from what we know from them this season. Again, Mahomes, somebody has to challenge him. They did last week. He had to put up the 3 scores. You mentioned not enough passing yards. And this one, maybe he just needs a get-well game. And I will say this is the best matchup on the board that Travis Kelce could have. So that could be the key to Mahomes. But I also think Tyreek Hill could help Tua go off. So really it might come down to the scores to see which of us is right on this one.
Yeah, neither of us are super excited for either of those guys. Yeah. Both of us would also play Jared Goff over those two. We know it's an away game, but a good defense against the Colts. We've been talking a lot about Jared Goff, so we don't need to hit on him again. But you have him at 7, I'm at 8, so we like Goff more than both Tua and Mahomes this week. I wanted to ask you one more question about the quarterbacks. Russell Wilson. We saw him have a couple good fantasy games. We liked him last week against the Ravens. It did not work out. This week at the Browns, would you go with him? The Browns have been giving up some fantasy points to quarterbacks lately, and a lot of their defensive players are hurt going into this game. Or Geno Smith against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I actually think the weather in this game, because Russell Wilson has a big arm and it could cause some slippage for the corners there on the field, that this could actually favor him a little bit more. And the Browns, we know, I've mentioned it multiple times, they give up deep balls. We saw it in the Chargers game. We saw it in the Saints game. That lines up exactly with what Russell Wilson can do and how he gets his fantasy points. He's not going to grind and get into red zone, but they also struggle to cover the tight end. So that could help him in the red zone with Pat Freiermuth. So it's clearly, for me, it's Russell Wilson. I think they're going to throw more than we might think against the Browns, at least to get the lead, right? Then they could turn it over, and hopefully those running backs will do more than I think they will, and they'll do more in line with what you will say about them. So I think he's going to have a big game throwing the ball downfield. It was an ugly game last week with no touchdowns, and we want a long touchdown. Get it out of the way. We don't want to get in the red zone. We need to score from 40 and 50 yards out. That's our problem. These short touchdowns are not us. So I think Wilson is going to do that. Where Geno Smith, the Cardinals defense, has played really well of late. So that's my concern. 2 things. You can run on the Seahawks or run the Cardinals much better than you could pass on them. I'm just worried Jonathan Gannon will come with a game plan that really gets multiple turnovers and messes with Geno this week.
Yeah, I'm with you with all of that. And I like Russell. He's going to be around my quarterback 15 ranking. It's not like I'm super high on him, but I do think he's a playable guy with upside, right? I won't be shocked if he has a really good game. Geno Smith, I would be a little bit shocked just because of how well this Cardinals passing defense has played, which is very, very shocking. That is it for today's episode. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Everydayers, please go hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Give us a like on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on. Leave us a review. We will be back tomorrow to hit on our wide receiver and tight end rankings. Hope you all have a great night. Bye, y'all.